All right. So imagine, Mark,
Mm.
you've made your fortune. You
Oh,
pay
how much?
people to
How
do your
much have I
job at
made? How
this
much
point.
have I made? How much have I made?
Enough to pay people to do your job for you at this point.
Oh yeah.
You're just what are you doing in your mind? How much have you made? What are you doing?
Uh, my figure to stop working and to just sit on my ass. Probably maybe 5 or 6 mil.
All right. So you're sitting on your 5 or 6 mil right now. Okay.
Yeah,
Nothing but money and time on your hands. And
beautiful.
another rich friend approaches you. They're like, hey, buddy, I've got the
Mm.
ultimate experience for you. All
Mm.
the rich people are doing it. I swear it'll be the thrill of a lifetime. What you need to
I'm in.
do,
Stop right there. I'm in.
let's let's not jump into it. I don't know if you will be. We'll see.
Okay.
What you need to do here, Mark, is to train harder than you've ever trained in your life. It's not
Oh.
enough to be running marathons.
Yeah.
Cardio won't cut it. You've got to be able to do your morning jog uphill carrying 50 to 60 pounds of weight with you. You're going to need to get limber as fuck. Yoga, Pilates, the whole thing. You're going to be hitting stairs so hard you make Rocky Balboa look like a fucking chump. You're going to have to pound those protein shakes and those flavorless packs of chicken that you eat all day,
I
air
do
day,
enjoy those.
because by the way, this wild ride is going to undo all this muscle work and deplete all this fat storage before you even reach your goal. It's going to be painful. You're going to need to have all the finest gizmos and gadgets. You're going to need insurance and the world's most crucial kind of OnStar. You're going to need the most skilled companions you can payroll. And at the end of all this, you either get some of the world's most impressive bragging rights,
Yeah.
or you die.
Oh, fuck.
So, Mark, if you had all the money and the time in the world to train, to get the best equipment, to hire the best people, to get an absolute peak fitness and worry about nothing else but this one goal, would you climb Mount Everest?
Right. Man, I know some people who made it to base camp, right? Who made it to Everest base camp. I know a group of friends of mine actually from South Wales. They climbed Kilimanjaro and then went on to do, they got to Everest base camp, but it was tough as fuck and not all of them made it. I don't think I would.
You don't think you would? Why not?
No, I don't. Well, because I don't think I want to do it. I don't think it would appeal to me.
That's a completely fair answer.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, look, hey, you know me, and you know that I enjoy a certain amount of, putting a certain amount of physical pressure on myself. I enjoy pushing my physical limits a little bit. I enjoy finding out what I'm capable of, but always within the boundaries of physical comfort and safety.
Yeah, totally.
There have been times when I've been out running and I've goosed my knee a little bit and I've gone, fuck, but I've limped home. Yeah. There have been times when I've kind of twanged an elbow a little bit at the gym. Oh, that's fine. I'll just go to the car and rest for a couple of days. I don't want to find that I've exerted myself too much when the consequence is death.
Right. You have no interest in breaking yourself or dying.
I don't ever want to die, Corrigan.
That makes sense to me.
I don't ever want to die. And if it comes to the fact that I do have to die, if that should happen, and I say if, because nothing's certain. Statistically, I'm probably going to die, but
yeah,
I'm an optimist. I want to be, as we know, as regular listeners, and you yourself will know, I want to be able to stage manage and control the manner of my exit. I don't want it to be in the fucking cold on my own in a mountain full of regret and, my fingers hanging off.
Now, it might surprise you that your reasoning right there actually does in some ways align with why people climb Mount Everest.
Okay.
Now, climbing a beast like Everest and the rest of the 7 summits is an absolute slog. It's not an adrenaline rush. It's not fun. And in addition to the year or so of hard training you need to do before you even get to the mountain, which I'm sure you know from your friends, you also have to spend about 2 months there. slowly getting acclimated, moving up the mountain, making sure you don't try to summit until all the conditions are the best they can possibly be. It's one of the most arduous activities that you can participate in. And it can seem absolutely baffling as to why anyone would do this. But according to sports psychologist Matthew Barlow, climbers seem more than other extreme athletes to seek out control rather than sensation. He calls it an exaggerated expectancy of agency. So they frame conquering something like Everest in terms of having control over their lives, control over their bodies, control over their environment, and the harsh conditions being thrown at them. And that's part of why it can feel so frustrating when you hear that old George Mallory retort that he climbs Mount Everest because it's there.
Yeah, of course.
It's a lot harder to articulate that what he means is, I need to dominate that mountain because it gives me a sense of control in a chaotic world.
Yeah.
In Barlow's research, he found that mountaineers believe that they struggle emotionally, especially when it came to loving partner relationships, and that, quote, they may compensate for this by becoming experts at dealing with emotions in another, more straightforwardly terrifying realm.
Yes.
The emotional anxiety of everyday life is confusing, ambiguous, and diffuse, and you don't know the source of it, Barlow says. In the mountains, the emotion is fear, and the source is clear. If I fall, I die. So it's an easy way to sort of grapple with emotions that these people have a hard time with in their everyday life. And journalist Elizabeth Hawley, who covered the Himalayas for decades starting in the 1960s, said that a lot of these climbers are literally just running away from hard stuff at home, leaving their wives to deal with sick kids and other family problems. Beck Weathers, who famously was left for dead on Mount Everest, but managed to survive, albeit with some really nasty frostbite injuries, realized he was being a giant dick as he grappled with his mortality on the mountain. And it ended up actually saving the marriage he was running from.
Well,
as he puts it, quote, if you don't have anyone who cares about you or is dependent on you, if you have no friends or colleagues, and if you're willing to put a single round in the chamber of a revolver and put it in your mouth and pull the trigger, then yeah, it's a pretty good idea to climb Everest. So just at the outset, climbers are maybe in a weird headspace. And that's not to say that all climbers are terrible or emotionally stunted. I follow a lot of climbers on Instagram who seem to have pretty stable lives and relationships, many of whom climb with their partners.
Yeah.
But this drive toward agency and need for control separates them from most of us. Even other thrill seekers, like people who jump off of cliffs or do parkour on buildings or ride on punishing roller coasters like you do, Mark. That's a seeking out of sensation, not a seeking out of control. And in fact, in those situations, you're often quite out of control of what is happening to you.
Completely.
So it's very different what they're experiencing. They exhibit what psychologists call counterphobia. While most of us react to our phobias by avoiding them, they experience a sense of control, peace, and relief when they are able to conquer them. So it's not that they aren't afraid of death, it's that they are. And that's why they have to face it. And face it, they definitely do. On Everest, the death rate is about 4%, which doesn't sound extremely high, especially compared to, say, Annapurna 1, which boasts a 33% death rate.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, it's insane. I'll talk about Annapurna 1 some other time because that shit's crazy. But some of the deaths on Everest have happened in really horrifying and devastating ways. For example, there's the famous blizzard of 1996 that John Krakauer wrote about in the fantastic book Into Thin Air. And it was made into a movie called Everest a few years ago, which, like, John Krakauer criticized it and was like, this is bullshit. But like, I had just reread the book like 3 days before seeing it. And I was like, wow, this is exactly the book. So I don't know what his issue was. I say, if you're interested in finding out what happened on that mountain in 1996, read the book and watch the movie. Both really good. But that leads me to one of the grimmer things about Everest, the bodies.
Sure.
You might have heard before about a particular corpse on Mount Everest known by the nickname Green Shoes.
I have, yes.
Have you heard of Green Shoes? You've probably seen pictures even of Green Shoes. And Green Shoes became sort of a landmark for climbers as the position of his body made it pretty much inevitable that you were going to see him on your trek up the mountain. The identity is not 100% certain, but
still there?
I'll get there.
Okay.
But it is thought to be 28-year-old Sawang Paljor, a member of the Indo-Tibetan Border Patrol who was caught in that 1996 blizzard. And for what it's worth, his brother absolutely hates that people gave him a cute nickname and talk about him like he's part of the scenery. And he did everything in his power to make sure that his mother never found out about that dehumanizing treatment of her son. So a thing to consider when, you know, people talk about green shoes and the bodies on Everest.
It's a
They're
fucking
people.
person. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there was another one. There was a woman who was known as the Sleeping Lady, I think. And that was like a woman who her son was 11, I believe, and in boarding school in Telluride, and had asked her not to go because he had a dream that she was going to die. And she went with his stepdad. Stepdad fell off a cliff trying to save her, and she died as well. And her body was sort of out in the open. And this poor kid, you know, had to deal with the fact that like Google Images is full of pictures of his mother with the nickname Sleeping Lady. That's
the essence of the reason that I would never train up and give it a crack. I don't want to be a fucking landmark, you know what I mean, with my elbow sticking into the snow. I don't want that.
Yeah, absolutely. So now you might think, well, if this guy is right in the climber's path and they have to step over him, why didn't they just bring him down after he died instead of turning him into a macabre signpost? And long story short, it's just super fucking hard. As one climber put it, leaning over to pick up a gum wrapper is a grueling task on the mountain. And bringing a body down requires the strength of 5 to 6 people who would also have to risk their lives to do it. And this kind of expedition costs around $70,000 to do as well. Paljor's brother wanted to pay to have his brother's body retrieved because actually someone had gone up and retrieved the Sleeping Lady, retrieved this kid's mom and brought her back down. And so he heard about that and he was like, I'll pay you to go and do this. And it was like $70,000. There's no way. There's no way that I could pay to do that. But also altitude is an issue that complicates both rescues and retrievals, as often people succumb to the elements higher up than a helicopter can safely fly. And time is also a factor. After a while, the bodies basically become stuck to the rocks, and it becomes more or less impossible to extricate them.
Part of the permafrost.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's very creepy to think about. The best way to dispose of bodies on Mount Everest is immediately after death. And the way to do it is generally to push them into a crevasse out of people's line of sight. If a body is out in the open, stuck to the mountain, and can't be yeeted into a crack, the next best thing is to cover them with rocks.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how they deal with bodies on Everest.
Not how I want to go. Not how I envision.
Yeeted into a crack or covered in rocks. No, absolutely not. And that's the respectful thing to do. That's no thanks on that. In the closest thing you can get to good news about this, Paljor's body, along with several other visible corpses on Everest, disappeared before the 2014 season. And no one is entirely sure where they went, but it's thought that the Chinese Tibetan Mountaineering Association, which manages Everest North Side, might have disposed of or otherwise covered them up. But even as these bodies are being disposed of, Everest is faced with another problem: climate change.
Sure.
As the glaciers melt on the top of the mountain, more bodies are turning up. Aung Shearing Sherpa, former president of the Nepal Mountaineering Association, said in 2019 that since 2008, his team had brought 7 bodies down the mountain, some of which could be traced back to a British expedition in the 70s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so climate change is unearthing bodies that have been there for 50 years almost. Not great. It's not ideal.
No. No. Do you have an estimate of how many corpses there are up there?
I mean, that's a really good question. I'm not sure. I think that, darn it, I closed my links. I think there was some estimate of it, but the thing is, there are times where like people went up there and we're not sure how many people were in the party that went up. So I think like 200 people have died in total on their way up there. but I'm not sure exactly how many of them, the remnants of them, are still up there. And so many, like I want to say it's like 29% of the people who die up there are in falls. So there's probably a lot like in those little cracks and things like that.
But I don't know if it was a genuine photo or what, but I remember seeing a photo of what is like the summit Everest in in the 2020s, and it's literally just a queue of fucking people waiting for their chance to get their selfie at the fucking top.
Right, which is a huge problem in and of itself. So Everest not only has the issue of these dead bodies, the fact that there are about 800 people who climb it each year, and keep in mind that that's a short window. It's usually a day or two in May.
That 4% of 800 is it's
I'm not going to try to do it, but
but that is some bodies, isn't it?
Yeah, that's some bodies. And so there's the more people you have causing these like traffic jams on Mount Everest and things like that, the more dangerous.
I think it's 32. I think it's 32.
Sure, I'll take it. Let's say 32. And it doesn't necessarily happen that many die each year, because again, there are larger events, avalanches, blizzards, things like that, that'll take out like a bunch of people at once. But those people are making it more dangerous to climb. It's becoming more commercial, so people who are less experienced are going up the mountain than the ones who used to go. And that was one of the things in 96, is that was like a commercial tour company, which was a relatively new thing at the time. And they're also leaving a shit ton of trash, so it's just covered in garbage as well. So where Everest used to be like this like really cool thing for people to accomplish, it's now kind of like, if you're rich enough to spend 2 months and $70,000, you can go up there.
Yeah, which is what is fucking up the pyramids.
Right.
Ayers Rock, I believe. All of that stuff is just it becomes more accessible, and ergo gets ruined. Right.
And that's the tough thing, because obviously everything should be accessible to people and not just the rich. But the issue is, how we
people
treat those
suck.
things. Yeah. The problem is people suck. And it still is something that only the elites can do, and they're making a giant mess of it, and killing themselves off because they don't know what they're doing and they're not prepared to do it. So yeah, as long as we keep fucking up the planet and messy adventurers seek out agency on the world's highest peaks, it seems that there will be no respite from the sight of death, as hundreds of tourists make their way up the mountain every year, hoping their journeys will yield better results. Also, I just feel like we need to invent robots for this.
What, to climb mountains?
To retrieve people and stuff from the mountain.
It feels like something Boston Dynamics could get all over.
But they're busy making war machines. They don't care about Everest. So, yeah. But it just feels like that should be a thing that someone's working on. I Googled Everest and robots, and the only thing I really found was a Quora question of someone asking, why don't they use robots on Everest? So...
And what was the
nobody
answer?
appears to be developing that. Well, someone responded and they were like, I'm in robotics or whatever, and they were like, robots really aren't advanced enough for that yet, and also money, so no one wants to develop that, because why? Exactly. Also the concern was that the Chinese government might not be super into people bringing robots onto Everest because they might be spies.
I'm convinced it's one of those things that, given all it will take is a billionaire to decide that it's something they want to do. I'm sure it's feasible. I'm sure it's viable. I'm sure you could build a fucking chuck enough sensors and enough AI and enough tentacles and enough servos on a robot. It could climb any fucking where. I'm certain of that.
Isn't that just like such a weird thing to think? Like, we can send Jeff Bezos to space and stuff like that, but like we haven't figured out robotics that can climb a mountain.
Curiosity is sending us 4K images of the surface of Mars, for fuck's sake.
Right.
We can't.
Yeah. Come on. This just feels like a misappropriation of resources, and I demand that someone get a robot on Everest. Also, because I just feel like an Everest robot would be really cute.